Only those who work enter here. Mariana's voice echoed through the building's hallway like a whip, sharp and cold. I stood there, in front of the apartment door where my son Gabriel and his 2 children, my grandchildren, lived, holding a bag with the fritters I made every Saturday. My fingers trembled around the plastic handle. Her words weren't just a shout, they were a sentence, a public humiliation meant to reduce me to the size of a speck of dust. Neighbors began to open their doors, curious faces peering through the crack, judging eyes fixing on me. I felt my face burn, not with shame for myself, but for the unnecessary cruelty of that woman whom I had welcomed with open arms into my family. Mariana, I only came to bring a little treat for the children. My voice came out low, almost a strangled whisper. I didn't want to argue, I never did, but she took a step forward, her eyes narrowed like those of a predator facing its prey. Do you think you can just show up here whenever you want? Live off your retirement and think you have the right to invade my house? I work, I support this family, and you are nothing but a useless old woman who only shows up to cause trouble. Each word was a stone thrown at me, and I felt my chest tighten, my breathing becoming difficult. Gabriel was behind her, silent, looking at the floor as if he didn't know me. My son, the boy I carried in my arms, whom I rocked during feverish nights, whom I taught to walk holding his little hands, was there, cowardly, silent in the face of my humiliation. Gabriel, please. I tried to reach him with my eyes, begging for a word, a gesture, anything that would tell me that there was still dignity in that relationship. But he looked away. At that moment, something broke inside me. It wasn't just my mother's heart, it was something deeper, a structure I had built throughout my life, based on the belief that family love was indestructible. Go away, Mrs. Helena, and only come back when you have something of value to offer. Mariana crossed her arms over her chest, and the smile of satisfaction that bloomed on her lips was the final straw. The door slammed in my face with a crash that reverberated throughout my being. I stood there, motionless, with the bag of fritters still in my hand, while silent tears ran down my face. The neighbors slowly closed their doors, and I was alone in that empty hallway, feeling smaller than I had ever felt in my entire life. I walked to the elevator like an automaton, my feet heavy, my mind a whirlwind of pain and confusion. How had I gotten here? How had the love I unconditionally dedicated to my son turned into that brutal rejection? The questions hammered in my head as I went down the floors, each number lit on the panel, reminding me that I was descending not only physically, but also on a scale of human value that should never have been created. When I arrived home, small and silent, I threw the bag on the kitchen table and let myself fall into the chair. I looked around, at the walls that had witnessed decades of a life dedicated to sacrifices, and for the first time in a long time, I allowed the memories to invade me without resistance. I needed to understand how I had gotten here, how that 63-year-old woman, a widow for 5 years, had become someone considered useless in the eyes of her own son. My story didn't begin in that humiliating hallway. It began long before, when I was just 19 years old and holding a positive pregnancy test in my trembling hands, knowing that my life would change forever. Roberto and I were young, in love, and naive. We married quickly, and Gabriel was born 6 months later, a tiny baby who cried all night and stole my sleep. Roberto worked as a truck driver, spending weeks away from home, and I found myself alone with a baby in my arms, without experience, without family nearby, only with my determination to be a good mother. I had dropped out of the pedagogy college in the 2nd semester to marry and take care of Gabriel. At the time, it seemed like the right choice, the only possible one. My mother had died when I was 15, and my father, a bitter and distant man, made it clear that I was on my own. Roberto was my family now, and Gabriel was my purpose. I spent the first years of motherhood in a tiny apartment, juggling between diapers, bottles, and bills that always seemed bigger than our budget. I learned to sew to repair Gabriel's clothes and make my own. I learned to cook creatively, turning simple ingredients into meals that filled the stomach and warmed the heart. I learned to be strong, even when loneliness screamed inside me. Gabriel grew up, and with him grew my responsibilities. Roberto started drinking, the trips became excuses to run away, and the marriage that was once made of dreams turned into a silent war of resentments. When Gabriel was 12 years old, Roberto had a road accident. He didn't die, but he was left with after effects that prevented him from working. Suddenly, I saw myself as the sole provider for the family. I got a job as a cleaning assistant at a school. I would wake up at 5 in the morning, clean bathrooms, hallways, classrooms, and come home exhausted, only to cook, take care of Roberto, and help Gabriel with his homework. I never complained, never let him see my tiredness. I wanted my son to have a better childhood than mine, for him to have opportunities that I never had. And Gabriel grew up intelligent, handsome, full of dreams. I encouraged him to study. I paid for a preparatory course for college with the money I saved by cutting expenses from everything possible. When he got into a public university for engineering, I cried with joy. It seemed that all the sacrifice had been worth it. Roberto died when Gabriel was in his 3rd year of college, a victim of a sudden heart attack. I buried him without tears, because the man I loved had already died years before, replaced by a bitter and alcoholic stranger. Gabriel was shaken, but I was his rock, his support, his fortress. I continued working, I continued being a mother, I continued being everything he needed. It was shortly after Gabriel's graduation that Mariana entered our lives. She was beautiful, confident, from an upper-middle-class family that always made it clear, subtly, that I wasn't good enough. I remember the first time I met her, at a dinner I made with all my affection, preparing each dish with care. She barely touched the food, commented that she was used to more refined seasonings, and Gabriel laughed, as if it were a funny joke. I swallowed the discomfort and smiled, because I wanted my son to be happy. If she made him happy, I would accept it. The wedding was a pompous ceremony that Mariana's family paid for. I felt out of place among the elegant guests, with my simple dress and worn shoes, but I was there for Gabriel, for my son, and that was all that mattered. In the early years, I was still welcome. I visited frequently, brought food, took care of the grandchildren when they were born. Luisa and Pedro were my joy, sweet children who ran into my arms whenever I appeared. But little by little, Mariana began to change. Small hints about my retirement, about me having nothing to do, about me always showing up unannounced. Gabriel, always on her side, began to agree. The visits became spaced out, until they became almost non-existent on my initiative, to avoid conflict. And then came that fateful Saturday, when I decided that I needed to see my grandchildren. I hadn't done anything wrong, I just wanted to bring a little affection, a piece of the love that overflowed in me. But I was greeted with that humiliation, that unnecessary cruelty, sitting in my silent kitchen, looking at the cupcakes that no one would eat. I felt an anger rising in me. It wasn't just anger at Mariana, but at myself, for having allowed myself to be treated that way, for having accepted crumbs of affection from a son that I had raised with such dedication. I spent days immersed in deep sadness. I didn't leave the house, I didn't answer the phone, I just existed in a state of emotional dormancy. It was my neighbor, Dona Conceição, a 70-year-old lady with more vitality than I imagined possible, who knocked on my door and refused to leave until I opened it. She came in, looked at me with those experienced eyes that had already seen life from all angles, and said, "Helena, you're going to rot in here if you continue like this. Come with me." She dragged me, literally, to a craft group that met at the neighborhood church. I resisted, claiming that I didn't know how to do anything, that I wasn't good with my hands. But Dona Conceição was insistent, and I was too weak to fight. It was in that group that I met women with stories as painful as mine, women who had been abandoned, betrayed, belittled, but who had found a way to rebuild their lives. One of them, Nusa, taught me how to crochet. She said that each stitch was a meditation, a way to reorganize thoughts while the hands worked. I started timidly, making simple pieces, and soon discovered that I had talent. The women in the group praised my work, asked me to make pieces for them, and for the first time in a long time, I felt that I had value. It was Nusa who suggested that I sell my pieces online. "Helena, this is beautiful. People would pay well for this," she said, holding a shawl that I had made. The idea seemed absurd to me at first. Me, a 63-year-old woman, selling things online, but Nusa helped me create a profile on a sales platform, took professional photos of my pieces, and posted them. To my surprise, orders started arriving. First one, then 3, then dozens. I could barely keep up with the demand. People loved my work, left kind comments, recommended me to friends. For the first time since I retired, I had an extra income, a purpose, something that was just mine. Months passed, and I transformed. I wasn't that broken woman who had been humiliated in a hallway anymore. I woke up excited, eager to see the new orders, to create increasingly elaborate pieces. My house, once silent and somber, was full of colors, of yarns, of life. I had regained my dignity, not through my son's recognition, but through self-recognition, the discovery that I had value regardless of the role I played in other people's lives. If you are reading this story and identified with any part of it, if you have ever felt invisible or undervalued, know that you are not alone. Continue following these accounts, because each story may be the key that opens the door to your own transformation. It was during a craft fair that we organized in the neighborhood that the unexpected happened. I was at my booth, showing my pieces to the customers, when I heard familiar voices. I turned around, and there they were, Gabriel, Mariana, Luisa, and Pedro. My heart raced, a mixture of joy at seeing my grandchildren, and apprehension about what was to come. The children saw me first, and ran towards me shouting, "Grandma! Grandma!" I hugged them tightly, feeling the tears burning in my eyes. How I missed them, how I missed that pure and unconditional love. Mariana approached slowly, her eyes scanning my booth with an expression I couldn't decipher. Gabriel was next to her, equally silent. "Grandma, what beautiful things," Luisa said, touching a crochet blanket. "Did you make this?" "Yes, my love. Grandma has been making many beautiful things," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Mariana picked up one of the pieces, an intricate shawl that had taken weeks to finish. She looked at the price tag, and her eyes widened. "You're selling this for that much?" There was disbelief in her voice. "Yes, it's handmade, each stitch with care. People appreciate craftsmanship," I replied, raising my chin. There was no challenge in my voice, just the statement of a fact. "Helena, I didn't know you did this." Gabriel finally spoke, and there was something in his tone that sounded like genuine surprise. "You didn't know because you never asked. Gabriel, you were never interested in knowing how I was, what I was doing, if I was okay. But it's all right. I discovered that I don't need anyone's approval to have value. I discovered that my work, whatever it may be, has dignity." The words came out calm, but loaded with a truth that could no longer be ignored. Mariana opened her mouth to speak, but Nusa appeared beside me, smiling. "Helena is the star of our group. Her pieces are the best sellers. She has orders for the next 3 months. By the way, Helena, that customer from Sao Paulo, confirmed the order for the 20 shawls for her boutique." I saw the flush rise on Mariana's face. Gabriel seemed genuinely impressed. Pedro tugged at his mother's sleeve and said, "Mommy, can we ask Grandma to make a blanket for my room? That blue one is the color I like." "Of course, my love. Grandma would do it with the greatest pleasure. But now I have a lot of orders, so you would have to wait a little bit." I stroked his hair, feeling the warmth of that connection that distance had not destroyed. "Mom," Gabriel began, but hesitated. "Can we talk? In private?" I asked Nusa to stay with the children for a moment, and walked away with Gabriel and Mariana. We walked to a quieter corner of the fair, and for a moment no one said. It was Mariana who broke the silence, and to my surprise, there were tears in her eyes. "I was cruel to you, Mrs. Helena. I have no excuses." She swallowed hard, fighting against the words. "My own mother always treated me as if I was never good enough. Everything I did was a reason for criticism. When I met Gabriel, the way you took care of him, of always being present, made me feel inadequate. As if I could never be the wife and mother he deserved, because you were the impossible standard. So I pushed you away, because it was easier than facing my own insecurity." I looked at her, at that woman I had turned into a villain in my mind, and I saw her humanity for the first time. I saw her wounds, her own struggles. It didn't justify what she had done, but it humanized her. Mariana, I never wanted to be a standard for okay. Here's the translation of block 4 of 5, keeping everything exactly as it is in the original text. I never wanted to compete. I just wanted to be near my family, my grandchildren. What you did to me that day. My voice failed, and I let the emotion come. It almost destroyed me. It almost made me believe that I really had no value, that my life of sacrifices meant nothing. I know, and I'm so sorry, truly. She reached out her hand, hesitant, and I took it. It wasn't complete forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. Gabriel finally spoke, and his voice was choked. Mom, I was a coward. I didn't defend you when I should have. I omitted because it's easier to agree than to confront. But seeing you here today, seeing what you built alone, how much you've grown, it makes me realize how much I hurt you, how ungrateful I was for everything you did for me. Gabriel, I didn't do anything expecting gratitude. I did it because I love you, because that's what mothers do. But love doesn't mean accepting disrespect. Love doesn't mean erasing yourself to make others feel comfortable. I learned that in these months. I learned that I can be a mother, a grandmother, and still be Helena, a whole woman, with dreams, talents, and her own dignity. We hugged right there, the three of us, a hug that didn't solve everything, but that started to heal deep wounds. The children came running, joining the hug, and at that moment, I felt that something had changed fundamentally. We wouldn't go back to what we were before, because that was broken, but we could build something new, based on mutual respect, on recognition, on truth. In the following weeks, we established healthy boundaries. We arranged times for visits, times when I would be present without invading their space. Gabriel started calling me regularly, not out of obligation, but out of a genuine desire to know how I was doing. Mariana slowly began to open up to me, sharing her own insecurities and fears. We didn't become best friends overnight, but we built a bridge, where before there was an abyss. My crochet business grew beyond my expectations. I opened a small online store, hired 2 women from the group to help me with the orders, and together we created a cooperative that not only gave us income, but also dignity and purpose. Each piece we sold carried the story of a woman who refused to disappear, who refused to accept that her value had expired. Today, when I look back at that humiliated woman in the hallway, I feel compassion for her, but also pride. Pride, because she didn't give up, because she used the pain as fuel for a profound transformation. The humiliation that should have destroyed me ended up freeing me. It freed me from the need for external approval, from the belief that my value was tied to what I did for others. I discovered that working doesn't just mean having a formal job. It means having purpose. It means creating. It means contributing to the world in ways that only you can do. Gabriel told me recently, while we were having coffee at my house, that he admires the woman I have become, that he feels inspired by my courage to start over when everything seemed lost. And I said to him something I learned in these months of reconstruction. Life never ends as long as you are still breathing. There is always time to reinvent yourself, to discover new talents, to refuse to be defined by the expectations of others, or by the roles that society tries to impose. I don't hold a grudge against Mariana or Gabriel. I hold gratitude for the brutal lesson they taught me, that I am complete by myself, that my value does not diminish when someone fails to recognize it, that true dignity comes from within, not from without. I continue to be a mother, I continue to be a grandmother, but now I am also Helena, artisan, businesswoman, a woman who discovered her strength when the world tried to convince her that she had none. People ask me if I have completely forgiven. The truth is that forgiveness is a process, not a single event. Some days it's easy, other days the bitterness still tightens my chest. But every day I choose not to allow that humiliation to define who I am. I choose to remember that I am more than the worst moment of my life, that I am more than the pain they inflicted on me. I am the sum of all the battles I fought, of all the sacrifices I made, of all the beauty I created with these hands that once only washed floors and today weave dreams in colorful threads. If there is one lesson I learned and that I want to leave for anyone who reads my story, it is this: never allow anyone to convince you that you are useless. It doesn't matter your age, your economic situation, your history. You have inherent value simply by existing, and that value does not need to be proven to anyone. The work that dignifies is not just the one that generates money, but the one that generates meaning, that makes you wake up with purpose, that makes you feel alive. It can be a formal job, it can be a hobby, it can be volunteering, it can be. Here's the direct translation of the provided block. In other arte, o que importe, e que seja seu, que seja verdadeiro, que seja uma expressão de quem você de realmente. Hoje, quando vejo Loise, e quedro brincando, na minha sala, cercados pelos novelos de lã coloridos, quando Gabriel me abraçou, com carinho genuíno, quando Mariana me pede conselhos sobre como lidar com suas próprias inseguranças, sei que aquele dia terrível, no corredor, não foi fim. Foi começo disfarçado de tragédia. Foi porão que eu precisava para parar de viver, através dos outros, e começar a viver, para mim mesma. E viver para si mesma, não é egoísmo, como a sociedade, às vezes tenta nos fazer acreditar. É a forma mais pura de amor próprio. E só quando aprendemos a nos amar, podemos realmente amar os outros, de forma saudável. E que é de risadas, de conversas, de cliente, que vem buscar encomendas, de mulheres, do grupo que passam para tomar café, e compartilhar histórias. Minha vida não é mais pequena, é vasta, colorida, cheia de possibilidades, que eu nem imaginava existir. E tudo isso começou no momento em que decidi que não seria mais definida pelo desprezo alheio, mas pela minha própria capacidade de me reerguer, de me reinventar, de me recusar a desaparecer. Porque mulheres como eu, mulheres como nós, não desaparecem. Nós nos transformamos, nos adaptamos, nos tornamos mais fortes nos lugares onde fomos quebradas. E essa é a mais bela vingança contra aqueles que tentaram nos diminuir. Simplesmente florescer. Culturally adapted, version for an English-speaking audience. Air, art. What matters is that it's yours, that it's true, that it's an expression of who you really are. Today, when I see Lily and Peter playing in my living room, surrounded by colorful skeins of yarn, when Gabe gives me a hug with genuine affection, when Mary asks me for advice on how to deal with her own insecurities, I know that terrible day in the hallway wasn't an end. It was a beginning disguised as a tragedy. It was the push I needed to stop living through others, and start living for myself. And living for yourself isn't selfishness, as society sometimes tries to make us believe. It's the purest form of self-love, and only when we learn to love ourselves, can we truly love others in a healthy way. My house isn't silent anymore. It's full of laughter, of conversations, of customers who come to pick up orders, of women from the group who stop by for coffee, and to share stories. My life isn't small anymore. It's vast, colorful, full of possibilities I never imagined existed. And all of this started the moment I decided I wouldn't be defined by someone else's contempt, but by my own ability to pick myself up, to reinvent myself, to refuse to disappear. Because women like me, women like us, don't disappear. We transform, we adapt, we become stronger in the places where we were broken. And that's the most beautiful revenge against those who tried to diminish us, simply to bloom.